WQAD News 8, this is WQAD This Week.
Good morning, it's Sunday, October 16th. Thank you for joining us for News 8 This Week. I'm Jon Diaz. Throughout the month of October, we're focusing on the decisions you may face on the ballot. This morning, we are looking at a proposed amendment to Iowa's Constitution. We'll hear first from a supporter of the amendment, then after the break, we'll hear from an opponent. The amendment would add the following to Iowa's Constitution. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The sovereign state of Iowa affirms and recognizes this right to be a fundamental individual right. Any and all restrictions of this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny. And joining us now to talk about this issue, Dave Funk, president of the Iowa Firearms Coalition. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here, John. Thank you.
We want to give our viewers a comprehensive view of this, but I want to start with your background so they understand the perspective that they're hearing from your background as well as the background of the organization you represent.
Sure. I'm the president. I'm a retired airline captain, a reserve police officer, Army officer, flew in the Iowa Army National Guard for 10 years, live outside of Des Moines. The Iowa Firearms Coalition and its predecessor organization, Iowa Carry, have been around about 15, 16 years. They started this effort to pass the freedom, what we call the Freedom Amendment, about 12 years ago. And 10 years ago, Governor Culver signed the first shall issue law within the state of Iowa, mandating that unless you were a prohibited person, you would be issued a permit to carry a weapon in the state of Iowa.
And now we've gotten to the point where this amendment has passed two sessions of the legislature and now is on the ballot. What is this amendment?
We call it the Freedom Amendment. It adds the right to keep and bear arms to the Iowa Constitution, and it actually goes through two general assemblies, so two separate legislatures have to vote on it. There's, 4 years ago that legislature did, 2 years ago they did it again, or excuse me, in 2021. Passes through two separate general assemblies, and then goes through a very difficult process then to be put out to the voters, which that has been complied with. The Constitution's not easy to change, either at the federal level or at the state level. And the legislature and the governor have pushed this out to the voters of the state of Iowa and said, what do you think? Which is the way things should work.
And what does this amendment say?
What it says is that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental right within the Iowa Constitution, and that right, any restrictions upon that right, are subject to strict scrutiny.
Let's talk about why you believe it's important.
What it does is it prevents another legislature or another governor in the future from coming in and either through administrative law changes or through acts of the legislature to change the more liberalized and very successful push that's happened within the Iowa legislature over the last 10, 15 years to allow Iowans who are non-prohibited persons to carry weapons as they see fit to defend themselves and their communities. It's very important. If you stop and think about it, it's probably the most nonpartisan issue. It's a basic civil right. And we often hear about, from the opposition, saying, well, this strict scrutiny is a problem. I would ask you, which of your fundamental rights, you as a journalist would know about the First Amendment as well as anyone, which of your fundamental rights, your right to be secure in your homes, your right to privacy, your right to peaceably assemble, to worship the way you want, which of those rights do you not want subject to strict scrutiny? And more importantly, in the Bruin case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin in the state of New York, the U.S. Supreme Court went beyond that and said, really, there can be no intermediate test. A fundamental right is a right the government should not be allowed to regulate. And it's, you can complain or you can talk about strict scrutiny all you want, but the fact is, the framers knew what they were doing when they gave us the right to keep and bear arms. And so today, it goes out to the voters of the state of Iowa to say, do you agree or not agree?
So let's talk about strict scrutiny, because
Sure.
the opposition to this would say this is going to put future legislation, perhaps legislation that a lot of people agree with, that they call reasonable. It's going to make that more difficult to pass, and it could sort of retroactively affect legislation that already exists. Is there validity to that?
Potentially it could, but when you ask yourself, what are the legislature's jobs? They represent us. We're a representative republic. We're not a straight democracy. But in this case, Iowans are speaking out with one voice. On Thursday this week, Iowans for Tax Relief, an organization that has a very accurate polling history. Part of their most recent poll, they released the poll on Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, said 62% of Iowans are going to vote for this amendment. They agree with it. And what we're doing is we're protecting our prosperity, our kids and our grandkids' rights to defend themselves and their community, to be safe in their homes, to be safe in their communities, and to defend their families, if necessary, using a firearm or some other weapon, as the case might be. In Europe, there are countries where you can own firearms, but it's strictly prohibited to use them for self-defense. You can only use them for hunting. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and the Freedom Amendment to the Iowa Constitution have nothing to do with hunting, and they have everything to do with protecting yourself, your person, your family, and your community. And that's the way the framers of the U.S. Constitution intended it.
If that is the intent with this, a lot of folks will draw this connection between this and gun violence. And they'll think about maybe something that happened in their neighborhood, or they'll think about a shooting that they saw on television at a mall, at a hospital, at a school. Do you see a direct line between these two things?
No, I don't. What I do see is the ability of people, when the moment chooses you, where evil comes and violence comes to your life, that you're able to defend yourself and you're not left defenseless. It might be cool to watch a woman in a movie that's 5'2" tall, roundhouse kick a 300-pound man. In real life, she doesn't win that battle. But if she has a .38 caliber revolver with her in her purse, she can win that battle. She's got some level to equalize the playing field. And yes, there's gun violence. Murder's illegal. Kidnapping's illegal. Lots of things are illegal, but people do them anyway. And criminals, by their very definition, are going to break the law. I want to protect the almost 100% of Americans that want to live their life normally, they want to raise their kids, they want to be safe in their home, they want to be safe in their communities. When bad things happen, who do you call? The police, who show up with guns. It might be 10 minutes, it might be 2 hours, depending on where you live in the United States before an officer can get to you. But if you can defend yourself, you hope would still call them for assistance, but you can stop whatever bad thing is happening at the moment it needs to be stopped.
I want to get a sense of what you're hearing out in Iowa, because you've been doing a lot of traveling on this issue.
Yes, and we've been doing this for well over a year. Been out educating the public on this amendment since the time it passed last year in the early part of last year's session of the legislature. We've been out educating people, and what we're finding is they agree with us. I've got very liberal friends who own firearms, and they're unwilling to give up their firearms to protect their home. I've got very conservative friends that think, oh, we can go even further. I think this is a very effective way to protect the rights of every citizen. And it's all about who has a monopoly on power. Is it the government through the police or the military, or is it the average citizen? Is there a balance? And whenever there's balance, we all tend to get along pretty well.
What did we not talk about that I should have asked you about?
Well, where is it on the ballot? If you live in Iowa, flip your ballot over to the back side, and down at the bottom it'll be Proposition 1. The amendment is spelled out, the exact wording, and vote yes.
Very good. All right, Dave Funk, thanks so much for joining us
Always
today.
a pleasure, John. Thank you.
All right. And after the break, a different take on Iowa's proposed amendment. We'll sit down with a representative with the group Moms Demand Action. We'll ask why they believe this amendment would make communities less safe. That's next on News 8 This Week.